Hallo Clara,
Hallo Annette, wie geht's?
gut, danke. Video starten? Nein, doch, Video starten. So.
Da bist du. Ich bin auch gerade noch am Rumfummeln. So. Ach, wir sind in neuen Offices und bei uns funktioniert noch nicht alles so mit dem Screens, wie man sich das so wünscht.
Okay, ja, wir schaffen das schon. Also jetzt technisch bin ich froh, dass ihr auf Zoom gewechselt habt,
Ja, es ist
weil
viel besser.
bei uns funktioniert Google Meet nicht. Und jetzt hat der Mitarbeiter von mir noch seinen privaten PC mitgenommen, damit wir das sicherstellen können, weil wir das schon mehrfach festgestellt haben. Die Stadt sperrt das.
Ja.
Und jetzt bin ich froh, jetzt kann ich eigentlich auf meinem normalen PC. War das gar nicht nötig.
Ja, wir haben gestern Abend habe ich noch Tests gemacht, wie es ist. Und es ist so userunfreundlich, weil man landet nicht direkt im Google Meet Call, sondern man muss was
Mhm.
kopieren und wieder einpasten, also ganz kompliziert. Und
Mhm.
zusätzlich haben sie vor 5 Tagen die Bestimmungen geändert. Auch wenn man Google Business hat, wird das Meeting nach 1 Stunde abgebrochen. Und das wäre,
Okay, wow.
ja, genau. Und dann habe ich noch alles umgestellt, weil das wäre natürlich saudämlich.
Ja, absolut. Jetzt schreibe ich gerne noch schnell Björn.
Ist das für euch in Ordnung, wenn wir das recorden?
Ja. Mhm.
Super. Der Martin wird auch alle anderen nachher noch bitten. Er macht so ein bisschen von unserer Seite aus die Introduction. Martin ist quasi mein Vorgesetzter und macht bei uns Sustainability strategisch.
Mhm.
Und dann würden wir eigentlich auch relativ schnell an Alexander abgeben. Und eure Präsentationen bauen eigentlich gut aufeinander auf, weil
Mhm.
er spricht genau über diese Klimaziele, nicht nur jetzt gerade seit der
Mhm.
Abstimmung im Juni, sondern auch so ein bisschen Richtung 2050. Und ihr
Mhm.
gebt dann danach die Beispiele. Also ich finde eigentlich, dass es sehr stimmig ist.
Mhm. Finde ich auch.
So, ich frage mal gerade, wo Martin ist. So, ich bin jetzt schon am Recorden. Mache ich jetzt nur Audio oder auch Video? Das ist hier die Frage. Ich glaube, das passt. So.
Warte, Chris, ich muss dich unterbrechen. Ich muss jetzt gleich in den Call. Ich muss in den Call. Wir hören uns, wir sehen uns. Halt schon. Tschüss.
Annette, das ist Martin. Hallo.
Hallo.
Hallo, hoi, freut mich.
Ja, freut mich auch. Wie geht's?
Gut. Ich bin froh, sind wir technisch jetzt mehr oder weniger parat.
Ja, das ist doch super, wunderbar. Hey, danke, dass ihr euch Zeit nehmt, dass du dir Zeit nimmst. Das ist mega cool. Ich bin also schon ganz gespannt.
Ja, ich auch. Ich bin gespannt auf die Frage. Ich weiß gar nicht, vielleicht noch schnell eine letzte Frage zur Logistik. Wir haben das jetzt für 20 Minuten vorbereitet. Ist das, meine ich, schon 20 Minuten präsentieren, oder? Und dann noch Fragen? Oder wäre 20 Minuten inklusive Fragen?
Nee, wir haben 60 Minuten total,
Mhm.
20 für Alexander, 20 für euch
Mhm.
und dann
Super.
20 für Frage-Antwort. Ich weiß nicht, ob euch das lieber ist, dass wir die Fragen alle am Ende machen oder ist es euch auch lieb, wenn die Leute zwischendrin fragen?
Nein, ich würde es gerne alles am Schluss machen.
Denke ich nämlich auch.
Q&A
Mhm.
Block. Ciao, Alexander.
Hallo
Hallo
Alexander,
Martin, hallo da.
Hallo.
Hallo.
welcome.
Ich gehe mich separat noch einloggen. Clara macht gerne das Briefing mit euch.
Super.
So, ich mache hier die Tür zu, sonst hören wir uns alle doppelt.
Punkt.
Okay. Ja, erstmal vielen Dank euch, dass ihr euch die Zeit nehmt und heute dabei seid. Wir freuen uns, dass wir von euch so spannende Diskussionspunkte haben. Die Präsentationen sehen super aus und wir haben so knapp 80 Anmeldungen. Wir hoffen, dass davon auch die meisten kommen. Das ist ja bei den Webinars immer so eine Sache. Und freuen uns darauf, dass hoffentlich auch ein paar interessante Fragen gestellt werden. Unsere Idee ist eigentlich, Martin macht eine ganz schnelle einfach nur ein Willkommen und sagt so ein bisschen agendamäßig, was jetzt passiert. Daraufhin übergibt er eigentlich relativ schnell an dich, Alexander. Du kannst in 20 Minuten präsentieren. Teilst du deine Präsentation selber, um auch selber weiterzuklicken? Super. Kannst du einmal testen, ob das jetzt schon geht? Ich habe eigentlich die Erlaubnis gegeben.
Und wir gehen, oder?
Traumhaft. Ja, hören können wir dich auch. Super.
Perfekt.
Klasse. Und wenn du fertig bist, würde ich kurz übernehmen, einfach ganz kurz sagen, vielen Dank und darauf aufbauend geben wir eigentlich direkt weiter an Annette und Björn. Und dann machen Annette und Björn 20 Minuten weiter und dann eröffnen wir danach die Frage-Antwort-Session. Fragen werden im Chat kommen und verbal. Da haben wir den Leuten jetzt nicht unbedingt Vorgaben gegeben. Und wir hoffen, dass es auf jeden Fall interaktiv wird. Ja, genau. Habt ihr noch Fragen?
Nein, ich glaube nur von der Zeit her war es nicht 10 bis 15 und dann Diskussion. Habe ich es falsch im Kopf?
Also du kannst präsentieren.
Ah, 15 bis 20, ja genau, ist gesehen, ja.
Genau,
Ja,
15. Und wir würden die Fragen, ich weiß nicht, ob das euch anders lieber ist, aber wir dachten, wir machen erst beide Präsentationen, weil die sich auch durchaus ergänzen in manchen Punkten und alle Fragen dann am Ende.
das passt gut für mich.
Super, super.
Also ich denke, ich kann es eher auf 15 Minuten machen wie auf
Perfekt.
20.
Super.
Genau.
Klasse. Ich schreibe dir gerade eine WhatsApp. Also wenn du jetzt über deine Anmeldung, Registrierungslink, geht es nicht. Nee, nicht über das Team-Invite, was wir gemacht haben. Ich schicke es dir gerade bei Slack. Mhm. So, nicht, dass andere jetzt auch Probleme haben. Tschupp. Hallo Martin.
Oh.
Kannst du uns hören? Da bist du ja.
Ja.
Super. So, Martin, während du die Intro machst, werde ich, anders konnten wir es nicht, weil wir haben eine Restriktion. Ich muss also die Leute alle einzeln quasi hereinlassen. Das heißt, ich werde so ein bisschen abwesend sein und du machst dann direkt einfach Intro und fragst kurz nach dem Recording, ob das in Ordnung ist für alle.
Mhm.
Du übergibst dann an Alexander, der teilt seine Präsentation selber.
Super, wunderbar. Ich übergebe direkt dem Alexander und nachher, Clara, kannst du übernehmen.
Gut.
Inklusive Q&A.
Gut.
Super. Wir sehen, dass man bei Digital Switzerland Briefings auch 8 Minuten vor der Show machen kann.
Das ist agil, wie das gehört.
Ach, Alexander, jetzt, aber erzähl einmal, was hast du für einen Modus? Also von dir sieht man entweder Fotos im Wahlkampf oder auf hohen Bergen.
Ich glaube, das beschreibt mein Leben recht adäquat. Ich würde mir wünschen, es wären noch mehr in den Bergen.
Eben, genau. Aber hast du ein paar schöne Touren können machen im Sommer?
Ja, absolut. Passend auch ins Wasser geht. Aber jetzt habe ich das im Herbst noch ein bisschen etwas, was ich noch mache. Und nein, das Jahr ein paar schöne Sachen gesehen. Ist cool.
Super. Ein gutes
Kann man,
Jahr. Das ist gut.
das ist schön in den Bergen in der Schweiz, haben wir Glück.
Ja, das stimmt. Sehr ist. Wunderbar. Und Annette, jetzt musst du mir noch schnell sagen, was machst denn du was machst denn du genau? Was ist deine Rolle und dein Auftrag?
Ich bin auch stumm. He? Ja, das hilft. Ich leite das Business Development bei EWZ Energielösungen. Das heisst, unser Kerngeschäft ist Wärme und Kälte im Contracting-Geschäftsmodell. Also das heisst, wir übernehmen die Anlagen und managen die für unsere Immobilienwirtschaftskunden. Und meine Rolle ist dort so wirklich die digitale Transformation vom Geschäftsbereich voranzutreiben. Das heisst, ich habe nicht viel zu tun mit Elektrizität oder Strom in unserem Versorgungsgebiet. Auch Netz, das ist aber nicht meine Thematik. Ich bin wirklich bei der Immobilienwirtschaft und wir versuchen für unsere internen Kunden da, für Verkauf, für die Realisierung, für den Betrieb Lösungen zu finden, aber auch immer mehr auch für die Immobilienwirtschaft selber, weil wir einfach gemerkt haben, das, was da intern gebraucht wird, wird auch extern gebraucht. Das wird auch so ein bisschen die Storyline jetzt da sein mit dieser Mission 100%, dass wir eigentlich ein bisschen zeigen, was machen wir da mit Hilfe von Open Data und weiteren Daten, mit Data Science, also ein bisschen für die Inspiration. Also es ist ein bisschen ein Mix, oder? Natürlich
Also
zeigen, was man selber kann und
was
was
sind
aber
denn die
möglich ist.
grossen Themen? Geht es um Daten und Smart Grid oder Smart Metering? Nicht Smart Grid, Smart Metering. Was sind denn so die grossen Themen jetzt bei dir?
Also bei mir ist es einfach ist das Ziel, dass wir möglichst schnell die Informationen zusammenkriegen, um bessere Entscheidungen herbeizuführen. Also Optimierungsfragen. Und ich selber bin dort eigentlich nicht der Experte, aber ich habe ein Team, das wirklich inzwischen sehr, sehr gezielt die nötigen Kompetenzen abdeckt und voll agil arbeitet. Das heißt, wir haben Data Science, wir haben Data Engineering, wir haben Requirements Engineer. Also wir haben so alles zusammen, was wir eben genau brauchen, um uns das zu überlegen. Wir haben einen Energieexperten, HLK-Experten, der das alles noch dann eben auch von der fachlichen Seite her einbringt. Und da unterstützen wir in den verschiedensten Hinsichten. Und eins, was ich heute eben zeige, ist die, ganz schnell will ich es nur anreissen, aber das ist eine Portfolioanalyse, wo man sämtliche Immobilien in der Schweiz beurteilen können bezüglich Photovoltaik und Eignung für, also wie wirtschaftlich wäre es, dort dann auch einen Zusammenschluss zum Eigenverbrauch zu machen. Und das Photovoltaik-Potenzial, das machen viele schon, das ist nicht jetzt wahnsinnig, das ist nicht Rocket Science, da nehmen wir auch Drittdaten, oder? Aber das sinnvoll zusammen verknüpfen mit eigenen Daten, mit Costing-Daten, das ist eben das, was spannend macht. Und die Idee heute wäre eigentlich dann sozusagen mitzugeben als Inspiration. Es ist möglich, die Fähigkeiten für die Energiewende zu nutzen, damit man eben schneller die richtigen Entscheidungen treffen und mehr Motivation in die Immobilienwirtschaft geben, sich zu bewegen, oder wenn ich
Aber
schnell
dann
die
ist das eine
richtigen
Art
Entscheidungen
wie
treffen.
einfach das Management von Schnittstellen.
Ja, es ist drei mehr, oder? Also darum brauche ich ja verschiedenste Kompetenzen im Team. Das fängt bei den Daten an als Quelle. Die müssen super in sauberer Form da liegen, damit es funktionieren kann, gut strukturiert sein. Ich brauche Applikationen. Und dann, aber das, was es wirklich wertvoll macht, ist das, was ich dann kann coden, wo ich Algorithmen zusammennehme und das dann auch wirklich berechnen, oder?
Mhm. Mega interessant.
Mhm. Genau, das passt jetzt wirklich super mit der Storyline vom Alexander, weil er macht ja eigentlich, er tut den Sense of Urgency nochmal aktivieren, oder? Das langt nicht, wir müssen jetzt schneller werden und wir gehen in den Sense of Urgency über, oder? Das ist eine riesen Aufgabe, aber lass uns mal darüber reden, könnten wir allenfalls da beschleunigen mit Hilfe eben von so Skills und vorliegenden Daten.
Ja, klar, er hat das super organisiert.
hat sich gut ergeben und Klarheit vermittelt. Das ist tipptopp.
Ja, ich bin froh, dass das geklappt hat, auch wenn mit dem, sage ich, sogenannten Sommerloch, das ja immer alles ein bisschen zäh ist, aber schön, dass wir jetzt zusammengekommen sind. Ich glaube auch, die Präsentation, auch ich habe es mir angeschaut, passen super gut zusammen. Vielen Dank auch an Michaela, Alexander, der hat so nett mit mir sich um alles gekümmert und war so toll erreichbar. Also ein großes Dankeschön auch von unserer Seite.
Die ausrichten, hat ihm Freude.
Super. Und das hat mega gut geklappt. Und jetzt bin ich ganz aufgeregt, ob die auch die ganzen Anmeldungen auch alle fleißig gleich eintrudeln. So, Simon Schmidtli versucht zu kommen. Dann lassen wir den.
Ich gehe mal auf Mute.
Ja. Hallo, lieber Björn, wir können dich noch nicht hören.
Jetzt hört man mich jetzt?
Jetzt perfekt. Hallo.
Ich höre aber noch nichts leider. Hallo, hallo?
Hörst du uns jetzt?
Mhm. Clara, du bist bei mir auf Stumm.
Genau. Hörst du mich jetzt? Jetzt habe ich mich wieder laut gestellt.
Annette, hörst du mich? Aber ich höre nichts leider.
Ja.
Grüezi miteinander, good afternoon. We will start the call in 1 to 3 minutes. There are still some people gathering something to eat, and we will wait for a couple of minutes. Good afternoon for those who just joined. Warm welcome to this call. We will wait for 1 to 2 more minutes, collecting more people. Grüezi miteinander, bonjour, hello, good afternoon, and a warm welcome to this call. My name is Martin, I'm with Digital Switzerland, and with me is Clara, who is now waving into the camera. We see Clara, super, good to have you here with us. So, we welcome you to this call. It's a first call from Digital Switzerland for the wider community. Clara and myself are in charge for the sustainability part of Digital Switzerland. And we thought after the last public vote, where Switzerland got now a regulation about climate, it is vital and it is also interesting for us in businesses, in NGOs, in trade associations to understand, okay, what does that mean now for my business? What do I need to do? And are there any opportunities somewhere hidden? And are there some practical things that we can do? And for that, we have invited 2 very distinguished guests. Clara will lead us through the whole event here. First, we have Alexander Keberle from economiesuisse, and then Annette Kern, who is leading something very, very interesting at EWZ, and she will talk about that to us in a minute. We will take questions at the end. There will be a Q&A at the end, so note down your questions and we will come back to it after the 2 inputs. One little thing, we are going to record that, so I hope this is okay, and you already gave your consent, I think, via the Zoom app. So, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce us to our first guest, Alexander Keberle, and I will now shut up. Have fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Martin, and hi everyone. The pleasure to online be here today. So as Martin said, my name is Alexander, and I'm leading all our climate, energy, and infrastructure work at economiesuisse. For transparency, I'm also part of the Green Liberal Party, but here having my my economiesuisse hat, and luckily we had the same stance on the climate policy, so that makes it a bit easier. Sorry? Oh, it was just that. Okay, perfect.
Please, everybody mute. Mute yourself.
Great. So today, actually, I have 3 things to discuss with you. The 3 key messages I want to discuss with you today are first that Swiss voters recently reaffirmed the commitment with the climate bill, which is the main topic of today, and it had some surprising clarity in it. Second, that now there will be more resources allocated to the transition, but a lot of those things remain still unclear. And also the third thing, for you as a company, maybe that what it really implies for you and your daily work. So I will start with a bit of a look back. I will go a bit back in time. I will go, to be exact, 6 years back in time, to 2017, when Switzerland ratified the Paris Agreement. And as you might know, the Paris Agreement sets out the ambition to reduce carbon emissions worldwide. And the Federal Council already then decided that we should go to net zero by 2050. So that net zero commitment is something that actually is not new at all. That has been around for quite some years. But what is important to know is that this was never actually ratified by the people. So that was a government decision and was a parliament decision. And we will also discuss about that later. But also the Swiss People's Party, the SVP, did not in the parliament make a referendum against the Paris Agreement. So actually this goal has been around for a long time. but that was just a goal and not much more happened. Then the second big thing that happened was the CO2 law, because trying to actually implement or work towards this 2050 goal, the parliament came up with a not very, but somewhat ambitious CO2 law. And for those of you who don't know the intricacies of the Swiss climate policy, basically we have this CO2 law, which in German is called CO2-Gesetz, which is always valid for a period of 10 years. And every 10 years, we kind of look at the new version of it and adjust climate policy to new realities. And there was the idea to have this climate law for the period that we are actually in now. And had a couple of things in, for instance, a tax levied on flights, or on buying flights, and some other things, which made it a relatively ambitious law or bill. But then there was a referendum against that, and actually the people, to the big surprise to many people, rejected the law. So that meant that in 2021 we had a big mess. In Germany you call it Scherbenhaufen, because basically we stood in the period for the next CO2 law, did not have any CO2 law anymore. We still had the 2050 ambition, but basically nothing in place. That was something I think a lot of people underestimated, that this would happen. I would even say we did as well. Economiesuisse said we were in favor of this law as a compromise, but I think nobody thought it was going to be rejected, but it was rejected. And that was the point when it was abundantly clear that Switzerland's climate policy totally lost all compass. I think Swiss climate policy was somewhat lost in the limbo between a goal in 2050 and the reality, which is very far away from it. And it was not clear what's going to happen. And then an additional political player popped up, which is the Glacier Initiative, Gletscherinitiative, which had the goal to put this 2050 goal not only in the law, as it already was, thanks to the Paris Agreement, but into the Constitution, and also made a couple of very strict rules and interventions combined with it. One example was the prohibition of fossil fuels by 2050, and the relatively ambitious decarbonization pathway towards 2050. And this initiative was quite popular in social media. They had these flags, which you might have seen all over the place in Switzerland. And then Parliament said, well, the idea is okay, but the initiative is a bit too radical. And they came up with the counter proposal to the initiative that in the end is what we also voted on recently in June. And actually a lot of players agreed to it. This counter proposal, all parties in Switzerland said yes to it, except the Swiss People's Party, who took the referendum, and also Economiesuisse, and I think almost all economic players said yes to this counter proposal. And with a tough election or vote and the tough campaign, in the end, it was accepted, surprisingly clear with 59%. Honestly, I thought it would be more towards 52, 53%. So a very clear and strong yes by the resounding yes by the population. But the whole discussion was around, will we actually achieve this goal, and do we have enough electricity to do so? And that was also what we saw. That was the main arguments that were in Parliament. And now we are actually at the point where we need to get into the details of the next CO2 law, so the one we rejected, but basically version 2.0, and that's what Parliament is actually at the moment. So that's a quick thing where we are. I think all this just to say we have a very clear goal, but we have still very little knowledge about the pathway, how we want to get there. Now, the key points of the Climate and Innovation Bill are relatively simple. First, net zero by 2050, reduction of domestic emissions, what cannot be reduced with negative emissions and direct air capture. The pathway is not linear, meaning it factors in that technology will hopefully accelerate the pathway in the future. Every company needs to reach net zero on and by themselves with roadmaps. And there is some subsidies of 2 billion over 10 years for heating and insulation, and then 1.2 billion over 6 years for innovation and new technologies. Notably, there is no prohibition of fossil fuels, and and the law, that's how it passed. I think overall to say it has, again, a high ambition. It has some measures, but the big criticism from left and right wing actually is that this is a tiger without tooth or without teeth, because in the end you have a lot of ambitions, but very little measures to actually reach it. I think it's very clear with $3.2 billion, we will not reach net zero. That's not the way to. That's not enough. That's not sufficient. Now, one argument that was also brought up is that we are by now that we have a very ambitious climate policy. That's not really true. If you look at this map, you see by when countries have set their net zero targets. First of all, you see almost all countries have net zero targets by now, at least the more developed ones, and some are much more ambitious than us, and notably the Nordics, Germany, are much more ambitious. Some countries already reached a net zero, but these are mostly underdeveloped countries. And yeah, in the end, you can see it's a global ambition. Now, as I said, we have a clear goal. We have a clear goal as a country. We have a clear goal as a population, and we also have a clear goal as international community. But how we get there really is not yet quite clear. Look at Switzerland in more detail. This is a study that was conducted by McKinsey & Company together with economiesuisse and the World Wildlife Federation. Here we try to really look at the emissions of Switzerland as a country. And what's very interesting is that Switzerland plays a much more important role in the global transition than one would think when you think about our small country. And why is that? Because Switzerland as a country only accounts for 0.1% of global emissions. And that's arguably not very much. So you can imagine that even if we reached net zero by tomorrow, that would hardly move the needle on a global scale. However, this is only part of the truth. It's only part of the story, because there's a couple of things to factor in. First of all, we have, as a very rich country, very high importations. So you see it at the bottom, 1.5 times what we have at home as emissions is imported. That's basically, for instance, if you, I don't know, import sport shoes from China and all the emissions that have been created in China to produce your sport shoes that you consume here in Switzerland, which kind of almost more than doubles our emissions. And then you have all the emissions of all those companies that are domiciled in Switzerland but are globally active, which then adds another 6 to 9 times our emissions at home. And then you have like a huge bucket of emissions that are associated with our financial center in Switzerland, because a lot of the investments globally are done via or through Switzerland. So that makes us a very important player globally. It's very important to say these emissions are not the ones that Switzerland is responsible for. Like by no international treaty and by no international standard, you can say these emissions are the ones that Switzerland is accountable for, because after all, it's attributed to the countries where these emissions actually happen. But it just shows that Switzerland, although being very small, is an important player globally in these things. Now, Switzerland is also quite ambitious at home. We have reduced emissions by more than 40% on a per capita basis since 1990, which is quite impressive. And we also have a lot of companies that committed to net zero, which, based on their global footprint, already have something like 450 megatons of CO2 they would reduce globally, which means that our companies, if they meet their targets, will account for 10 times Switzerland's emissions globally in terms of reduction. So we have a lot that we already do and a lot that is already planned to do. I think Switzerland makes progress and is also trying to live up to its role and its ambition. However, we are still not on track. You can see here the gap on this graph, depending on different pathways calculated by different organizations and reality. We are actually going to miss the target by quite a bit if we continue like we are. So we have at the moment quite a big gap between our ambition and where we're actually going. However, on the other side, we also have very strong political challenges. It would be naive to say that the only goal is to reach net zero. The goal is also to have an acceptable policy. And I think here the last years showed that the wind is turning a little bit. an example in Germany. Germany, the Green Party has fallen really, like, has almost hit rock bottom in terms of voter support. The AfD has basically surged in voters' support by saying the Green Party is destroying the wealth of Germany. Also in Switzerland, we've had the Swiss People's Party, who, with very aggressive kind of campaign, showed that we have that all the climate ambition is damaging Switzerland. So there is a lot of headwind, and we need to be aware that climate policy needs to be acceptable to the broad population in order to succeed. Otherwise, it will backfire. And you can basically see that from political perspective, and we see that as a association every day, it's a very, very delicate balancing act between, on the one hand side, missing net zero, and on the other hand, on the other side, to forfeit political support, and then basically not being able to do anything anymore. So this balancing act is quite delicate, and one needs to be aware of that when designing the policies. And to be honest, our, I would even say, incompetence of managing this balancing act is the reason why at the moment politically we have one law after the other that sets goals and ambitions, but basically do not manage with any law that actually implements any measures. So it's politically much easier to say, let's agree on a goal for 2050, but basically not having any measure, and all measures lack political support because they are too extreme in the one or the other side. Figuratively speaking, if you allow me, and that's maybe a bit of a gloomy picture, but still, what we have done with this climate law is we have passed the children's slope in skiing terms. As a Swiss person, I'm obviously very much into skiing. And you can see, like, the left-hand side, that's a bit what we managed in terms of climate policy. But now the real skiing starts. To really get these measures in place and making sure we reach the ambition without losing voter support, that's going to be a huge challenge. And I don't want to say I have the answer, not at all. But that's where we actually are. So we need to realize, like, that with this law, that this bill that we passed, there is not very much achieved yet. It's just the ambition. For the kind of the implications we have from that is, of course, we need to reach net zero. We must substitute fossil with electric energy. We need to fix our supply with clean energy now. We've seen that we actually already now struggle with energy, with electricity, and that will only become worse by 2050. We should accelerate negative emissions. That's technology that we really is in its infancy stage at the moment, but we need to have it much more at a much larger scale. And we ought to prioritize innovation wherever possible, because we saw that innovation is something that gains support by voters, whereas like strict prohibitions, like the tax on flying or flight tickets, often leads to total damage or crash of a law. What it means by electricity, I really want to drive home that point. We need to double the production of electricity, of cleaner electricity that we have at the moment. At the moment, we have we need to double all the installed base of electricity, and that's an absolutely incredible challenge. You have to imagine we need now about 130 years to create all this electricity or this production, and we need to double that till 2050. And I want to be very honest, we are not on track at all at the moment. We're way too slow, and that's going to be a huge problem for the net zero commitment. And we also try to quantify that, and we think on a scale 1 to 5, where 5 is we will never manage it, and 1 is we are on track. We think we are at 4. That's inspired, as you might have noticed, I'm into mountains, and that's inspired by the avalanche Baltan in Switzerland. Now, very shortly and finally, what does it make for you? What does it mean for you as companies? First of all, law clearly says now you have to be net zero by 2050. And this is regardless if you're a small SME that has almost zero emissions already now, or if you're already in an energy intensive company that is already dealing with that, your scope 1 and 2 needs to be net zero by 2050. The second thing is you are invited to create a roadmap to do that. The federal government will be obliged to support you. And the third thing is you are entitled to subsidies for novel processes and technologies if you deploy them until 2030. And the last piece is that you will be definitely affected by green financing rules. So if your business does not count as sustainable, and there's different things already on the way in Parliament, then you will have a very, very difficult time financing. And also, if you want to, for instance, sell your company, most PE companies, for instance, by now require some kind of sustainability track record. Otherwise, the financing gets much more difficult. And the second thing it implies is that SMEs are really getting into the focus. At the moment in Switzerland, we have about 60% of value creation by SMEs and 40 to 50% estimated of the emissions, but they are at the moment hardly looked at because the focus of government is mostly on large companies. And what that means for you personally is that you need to definitely, it's a good time to start making your baseline if you haven't done so already. I'm doing that as well. I'm leading an SME at the site with about 70 people, and we start with doing that now. The second thing is you have to develop a roadmap. Maybe you should wait a bit until it's clear what roadmap will be accepted by the government, but that should be clear within the next half year. And the third thing is you should check if you have any novel technologies that you could deploy. Potentially, that could be something where you get support to do it. And the last thing I said before is green financing. I can only drive home that point. If you ever look at M&A or if you look at loans, you will have potentially a very significant interest rate advantage if you are climate compliant in the future. That's basically the main points I wanted to say. And I will be very happy to take questions after the next presentation. And thank you very much already.
Thank you, Alexander, for this very insightful and to-the-point summary of the legislation, the current status quo, how we came here, and what Switzerland and Swiss companies have to do in order to prepare for the 2050 climate strategy. And I think it's fascinating to see that it's not only that we need stronger policy, but it's also considering our own emissions, but also the ones we're importing. And I think it's important to note or to underline how you said that innovation in electricity is playing such an important role in reaching these goals. And I think this is the perfect connection to open the floor for our second guests from EWZ. I would like to welcome Annette Kern-Ulmer. She's Head of Business Development, and Björn Slawik, Head of Product Development from EWZ. And they're going to give us some more insights, especially practically how companies and we can prepare for a good transition towards climate neutrality. Thank you, and I leave the floor to you.
Thank you very much. I will begin. I will start. I'd like to introduce me very short. My name is Björn Slawik. I'm Head of Product Development at EWZ in Zurich. And Annette will help me with the presentation, or can I, Annette?
Not sure if I can give you the... Hang on. If I find you, I can give you the steering. Otherwise, I just push the button.
And push the button is also okay. So thank you also, Alexander. It was very interesting, and I think we can give some more information about the challenges. The challenges of the transformation to climate neutrality are great. You see here the picture, which is an explanation of the main tasks we have to do. So achieving the goals means that we have a massive expansion of renewable energies, such as PV or heat pumps. It means also very strong efficiency gains, so we don't need so much new electricity production if we are more efficient. It also means re-questioning of consumption and production patterns at the moment. This is maybe the elephant in the room at the moment, because currently there's still no discussion about sufficiency in the society or in the politics. And we also need a massive building of new infrastructure for heating and cooling, and also for electricity. For all this, we need digital energy infrastructure, so such meters, control devices, and management systems. And it looks like a heavy stone which we have to push. But the next slide, we have no other possibility. The climate neutral future is worthwhile because it's the best future we have. Otherwise, ecological changes worldwide will force us to make our lifestyles climate friendly as well. at least that is what the climate models currently suggest. We have had a small foretaste of the weather extremes threatening us in recent years. And we think it's a great opportunity too. If you see this here on this picture, the transformation offers enormous opportunities for Switzerland and worldwide. It can succeed if we push avoidance, efficiency gains, and electrification in parallel. The transport systems offers huge opportunities through intelligent mobility systems, and the building sector stands alone for 60 million tons every year. This is now unnecessary, as we can now supply buildings with mostly climate neutral space heating. It's a question of doing and wanting. So as a company, we have a responsibility to make a significant contribution to climate neutrality. We have therefore launched the 100% campaign. Until 2030, we will work with the real estate industry to make 100 sites and major real estate projects 100% climate neutral. We are now on the way to this. Here you see one example, which is a little bit older, from 2017. Our energy concept is based on the 2000 watt principles. At first, we have very much PV production here. 500 kilowatt peak is installed on this building, and this is used for electricity production for heat pumps, and also used from the people who live in these homes. They will also use the energy. And on the other side, we have a heating and cooling system. Primary energy source is groundwater. It is collected via the boreholes and then heated to the required temperature level of 35 degrees. And all this is now existing. We have also, for the future, already around about 20 other projects in Switzerland in this context. And we are hopefully that we can give a good example how it will work in Switzerland. So this was my first introduction to the goal and to the challenges. And now Annette will show us how digital data can be used to solve the problems here faster than in the history. Thank you very much.
Super. Thank you very much, Björn, for explaining and leading to this part of the presentation. I think one thing that I would like to add to Björn's explanation of the mission 100%, maybe you have asked yourself why we are doing it. Of course, there are commercial reasons. That's our core business. We are in energy solutions, so that's what we are really good at. But the other thing why we have given us this mission is a little bit in a bigger context. We said, if the challenge is as huge as Alexander showed us very significantly, it's really a huge task and we don't have much time, as I will also show later, then we would also like to offer an inspiration, a source of inspiration. So if we can do things like Green City, if we can help or together with the client, if we can make this happen, then it could probably also be an inspiration to other building owners. If you can do this on this large scale, it should also be possible on a smaller scale. And that is one of the big motivations also why we are pushing this mission 100%. Now, in additional, that's just continuing to Björn's explanations, which are then the game changers for the transformation until 2050. You can see from the first picture where we saw the challenges. Now here we see the figures that are needed, and that is very much in resonance with what Alexander was also already showing us. But just with a view on the energy sector and on the building sector, we need to increase solar production by 17 times what we are doing now in order to achieve the 2050 goals. We need to, we will have a lot more electric vehicles that will also need electric energy. We will have to install much more heat pumps in order to replace fossil fuels, because if we just use pellets, maybe you have all been reading, if we reading the recent articles, pellets are not always, at least not in large volumes, a good idea, because it also means that we are cutting trees in order to heat our homes, and on the large scales that we need it, that's probably not the solution. So we need to rather draw heat from sources where we have it, in a natural way or almost natural way. And then, of course, we also need at the structural part of the buildings, if we can increase insulation and build better structures or improve the structures that we have, then also that means we will need less energy in winter time. So these are the huge challenges, or the numbers around those challenges. But also now let's look at the chances in this. We basically have, if we focus now on the Swiss building park, Swiss building sector, we have 1.8 million residential buildings, and around 75% of those are built before 1990. And if we look at the large buildings, not at the single family homes, but at the larger buildings where we have a lever, we have around 600,000 buildings, which we could improve massively and then lower our energy consumptions. But the question is, how can we do this, and where do we start? Ideally, we give an incentive, also an economic incentive to the building owners to start, because if it's not economic, then usually you have less incentive to do something, unless you have regulation, of course, as we heard. Where do we start? And now I'm leading over to the solution, or to a possible solutions, how we can help building owners with the help of open data and of geo information. And that's actually the point we would like to drive home with this presentation. It is possible to help building owners, or also portfolio building owners, to make good decisions, and and then also to instill the motivation to really act now. And the hypothesis that we have at the basis of this is, if we can identify the potentials for CO2 reductions to building owners with a very low effort and also at very low cost to them, meaning they have the information just by a click, for example, and if we can show to them that this is also economically sensible, not only ecologically, giving them sort of a business case, then building owners have an incentive to accelerate implementation. And the question that we derive from this hypothesis is, how can we provide good orientation and the right information to facilitate such good decision making? And now this is, for us, we would like to drive home the case for open data and geodata. And how that could look like, I'm just briefly touching on it, but to give you an idea what we are doing, we are trying to really massively use open data, geodata, combining it also with our own experience, with our own data, in order to help business owners to give them a starting point. Where should I start? In my own building, or if I have several buildings, with which building should I start? So the questions that, a sample of the questions that we are trying to answer, you can see here. For example, if I do energetic renovation, how much heat will I need then, and how much CO2 impact will that have? Or if I want, as an energy solutions provider, if I want to help a customer at a huge site, which energy system design should I use in order to have the best solution in terms of ecological and economic perspective, and so on and so on. And now I would like to focus very shortly on the left upper case. As an owner of a building portfolio, I would like to know with which building should I start equipping my roof with PV hardware. And now this one we just implemented recently, and we saw that it really hit a nerve, because what we did is we are looking at the whole Swiss building park with a set of open data. You can see it in the second part of the slide, the basis. We have data from Swiss Topo, from Sonnendach. We have energy tariffs, standard production profiles, standard load profiles. Some of these data you can just take openly. Everybody can. And other things like load profiles, this is a bit more specific. You need to have a set of data. That's something we have from our own set of data from EWZ. And if you combine all those data, you are able to answer questions, more specific questions like the ones you see in the blue bubbles. Basically, if you want to know which building you should equip, you want to know which business model should I use? Should I go for the auto-consumption, for the Zusammenschluss zum Eigenverbrauch in German? Should I rather go just for selling back my electricity production to the local utility? How high will be my self-consumption in the building with all the tenants that I have? And yeah, where should I start? Which are the ones that are most economically viable? And why are we trying to answer this question to building portfolio owners? The challenge they have is they have lots of buildings, but they only have a small team usually. So their resources are limited. They really need to know which ones they should do first, because they cannot do it all at once. And then, of course, they have a very high motivation and pressure, as Alexander told us, to achieve sustainability targets. And if it is being closely tracked, then by attacking the right order of buildings with PV, then they can move forward and also have good business cases along this. So it is a double motivation to start with implementation. Now I'm trying to come to an end in order not to stretch the time budget too much. But basically, as you have seen, there is lots of other questions that can be answered with open data. Maybe you yourself have now other questions in your mind where you feel that open data could be an answer. And that was also part of the motivation why we chose this specific thing to show you. We would like to inspire you also to use this data. There's lots of additional data sets coming into play, I think even every month, on a local basis, on a cantonal basis, on a national basis. Those data sets are being improved over time, because now that they're important, also everybody is looking that there is a high quality of these data sets. And we would like to inspire everybody to really use these possibilities to improve your own decision making. So if we have to sum it all up, I think also this resonates a lot with Alexander. Basically, the transition towards net zero requires now really, really fast and focused actions from everybody, as we have seen from Alexander also, by providing quickly available and database decision support. We think we can really inspire the main players to move faster. And this is even more so if the solution is economically viable. And at EWZ, we think that what we are seeing now with open data is just the beginning of the possibilities. We are just scratching the surface. We will have a lot more possibilities to answer such tricky questions. And now, if we count artificial intelligence into the play, I think this is even more so. We will have lots of possibilities to start acting, and to start acting more consciously, and particularly also to act faster. And with this, I would like to conclude, and I'm much looking, or we are all, I think, much looking forward to the questions which you have. And a final word, yeah, let's start to act.
Thank you so much to both of you, Annette and Björn, for this thoroughly presentation, especially giving the examples how the building sector affects our total CO2 production. And I would like to start by leaving the floor to those who have already put their questions in the chat. So I think the first person I saw was Leni. Maybe Leni, would you like to ask your question again, or has Alexander already answered to you in the chat?
Yes, thank you. I think Alexander asked me my question in the chat, and we continue the discussion there. Thank you.
Okay, great. No, it was good to see that there's already some heated conversations, which is always good. This is how we make progress. And then the next question was presented by Svetlana. You asked about the Brennstoffzellen. So maybe you want to pose your question again. Are Brennstoffzellen part of the solution for the net zero targets or not? I guess that's a question more related to EWZ.
Yes, but it's fine. I think it's already answered already in the chat. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for answering then, Björn. And then there's a question by Dominique. Okay, maybe I'll just repeat.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, my question was regarding large-scale geothermal energy projects, because I think it still has huge potential, but things are not really moving ahead also, despite because of the problems that they have faced with these pilot projects in Switzerland. And actually, the question was answered to a certain extent, saying it takes much time to develop these kind of projects. And I completely agree. But the question is, shouldn't the big players still push this option? Because for the future energy mix, we need various options regarding larger scale projects. And so I'm wondering why there is not big players, why they're not pushing me more for that. And so, yeah, that was the reason for my question, just curious.
Well, maybe just a few additional lines from me. EWZ is, I think, a shareholder of one of those companies exploring deep geothermy, but I'm not really very close to what is the actual plan and how much this company is pushing further projects. As for my business unit, we are more looking into district heating solutions, which are able to deliver heating and cooling, because cooling will be, as we have all been seeing in the past few days, cooling will become a lot more important on a lot more days in the year. And this also needs to be done in an ecologically responsible manner. And we are a lot into Energienetze, where you can kind of draw energy and put energy into it. So it is kind of more flexible. And also what we are, of course, much looking at is Abwärmelösungen, where we can take heat from other companies like data centers and so on, or even wastewater plants. And we draw heat from there in order to distribute it to more households. I think this is, I don't know if that will be covering all the heat demand in the future, probably not, but it will be certainly a bigger part of the solution.
I can agree, because we have to be fast, and this is a question of deep geothermal energy, and these projects also have sometimes the part of electricity production, and this is very expensive. So we have some reasons that they don't succeed or haven't succeeded in the history. And I agree with Annette that we have to do this what we can do fast.
Thank you very much, Björn and Annette, for your further explanation. Dominic, I hope this a little bit further helped you to understand or answer your question a bit better. And I actually also have a question, and that's a little bit related to the parliament and the roadmap we have. So Alexander, you explained to us that the decision in June is basically now we are at the children's ski slope, but we have to be a little bit faster. This was very understandable for me. And you said that the companies, the roadmaps that they are now preparing internally, in which way do we start? Like, what is the best way to start your roadmap? So first of all, wait until the end of the year, you said, a little bit, to see where the parliament is going with their strategy, and how do you suggest which is one of the biggest sectors to start with, besides from electricity?
I mean, it's a great question. I think I would like to answer in two parts. The first is, I think if you're an energy intensive enterprise or company, I'm sure you already have it on your agenda. I mean, with current electricity prices and oil prices, there is no way that this question has never popped up in your mind. So I think for all these companies, I don't have to say much. There's already also a lot going on. For those companies which, like, for instance, my SME, I mean, I'm a chair of the board of a SME, as I said, with about 70 people. We are in services. We have hardly any emissions, scope 1 and 2, because it's basically, we have a little heating and but this is not much, right? And some electricity. And for us, this never really crossed our mind like in an intensive way, right? And I think for these companies, there's two things. One is, I think it's always good to make a baseline. So I would always start to have a baseline. And for instance, we did it, and I was very surprised to learn that actually our highest lever is the commuting of our employees, right? So because we have employees commuting sometimes from far away, and that actually that hits us most in terms of emissions. So that's a no regret move. Number two is going for the obvious quick wins. An example, if you're in a house with oil or something, then I think that's one thing to tackle at. And then indeed the question to how to really get to zero, as much as I know it's not very inspiring to say, I would indeed wait a bit, wait and see. Like basically spend the next year in really getting all the quick wins out of the way. I think most companies really have still some quick wins to do. And for the rest, it depends a bit because it's a bit unclear. And for instance, if I do now a roadmap and in the end it's not compliant with the roadmap that the Federation wants, then you have to do work double, and that kind of sucks. So that's a bit the unpleasant truth of the current situation.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I will start by really looking at my scope 1 and 2 and see what I can do as a quick fix there. And then we look at the larger strategy a little bit later. Are there any other questions maybe from people in the audience? I have so many, but maybe somebody else also would like to ask a question. I will check in the chat. Okay, I think there's more. There's another question. So do we have an idea of the amount of trained people that we need to enable this transition? So I think this is more related to the workforce needed. I mean, Annette, you gave this example a little bit in relation to the building sector, that usually they are owning a lot of buildings, but there's very small teams. So what needs to happen in terms, I think workforce is a big topic these days as well. What is needed to enable the transition? And do we have enough people? So is there enough people also in Switzerland? Or is there something that we have to prepare from, also looking at the from people from international, from countries and coming from abroad?
I think we have. Annette, do you?
Go ahead. You are closer affected by not having enough people or partners to implement.
We have really a challenge with people, with good staff to find and to engage for a long time here, because it's not a project for 2 years; it's a project for the next 20 years. But we are at the beginning of the push. Like Alexander showed, we are now have a very exciting sport or exciting job for the next 20, 30 years. And I hope and I'm convinced that we'll get the people, we will get new job profiles, and it needs maybe 3, 4, 5 years, but there will go so much capital also in this sector, so we can solve this challenge. I was the last sentence. I was at the Smarter E conference, and ferry in Munich this year, and it was great to see how much capital goes in this renewable energy sector, and capital also gives jobs, and jobs needs people.
Thank you. So you think that there's also the potential that companies can train the new workforce internally? And of course, there's always the youth coming from universities, but you think it's really possible to achieve that in-house, let's say?
It's both. You need staff from outside. You can do it. Some people give some people other jobs in your company. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's a great challenge, but it's also very exciting to do this.
But I think it is the responsibility of companies like ours to also start training more people. We have a lot of young people being trained in the grid, but probably also we need to look more and push more for people, specifically also in my unit where we have energy solutions, heating, cooling. We have now young people in a small number. It's increasing, but as we see with all the quantities that we need, probably the only way to really ensure that we can make the push and that we can also attract the human capital. Because from experience with my colleagues who are desperately trying to get good people for project development, for PV installations, we are really looking for good people, and it sometimes takes a long time until we can close such an open position. A recent example is in energy consulting. We have an energy consulting unit. My colleague has been looking for a good qualified, it's not even a very good qualified person, it's just a qualified person, and he was looking for over a year to close the position. Just to give you an idea, it really depends on the specificity of the job, and I'm sure people in this call will be agreeing, and some of you will have similar experience depending on the specificity and specialty that you're looking for.
Thank you, Annette. And I think, we already also have questions in the chat about the role of digital solutions. I mean, there's a huge debate whether this is AI or digital solutions and technology in general, and the role they play, also especially in the connection to the workforce. And I think it goes, there's two emotions going on. On the one hand, there's big excitement because technical solutions can play a vital role in supporting the sustainable transition. But on the other hand, there's also always that level of distrust, and especially when it comes to AI. But we also saw at the AI and conference last week we had was Digital Switzerland. We saw that there's so many opportunities that AI presents and that we still have to use. What do you think is the outlook there? Do we have to be very cautious and afraid, or do you agree that we actually should foster that more, especially we as humans offering a little bit the human side to the technology that supports the right decisions, and in the end also will take the responsibility for it?
Of course, I would say we have to be cautious, but we have to use it where it is useful for us. And we know that it's very useful for the new energy system. So it's a very difficult question, but it's not yes or no. It's both.
I think we have two counter things, two things going counter each other. One is that AI has real threats, and we're moving in an ethical discussion now. I think this is very tricky. AI, depending on how you use it, has huge threats, huge chances. But on the other hand, we also have data protection, data security issues, protection of personal data. And I think we need to find a good line of balance in order to take those chances that are not threatening people, but helping to make these challenges, to master these challenges. And I'm thinking specifically now, for example, about the question of how much energy is my building consuming, or things around building structures. We are sometimes having hard time of getting certain data anonymized. It's not about really I don't want to know exactly how a person in a house is using something, but anonymized, which is still hard to get, although it would make our analysis and our optimizations a lot more valuable. And if we need to find the balance where we can still act and use these chances without threatening or disturbing people's privacy needs for privacy. I think this is the challenge we need to master now, looking just at the energy question. Of course, there are other questions that are much more tricky.
Thank you, Annette. So I think this underlines also Alexander's explanation of, there's always a need for balance. And in his example, it's the balance between missing the net zero and the forfeit of political support. And here we talk about the human side and technology. So I think this summed it up quite well. Now that we are already quite far along in our time, are there any questions maybe from the audience? Leni, you raised your hand. Please go ahead.
Yes. So there is a new point. There's a point in the new law where the state can provide help in terms of skills and finance to the companies to establish their roadmap. And I was wondering if anyone knows about the mechanics of it. Is it the state that will have a list of approved consulting bodies that it will contract whenever there is need to help a company, or if that's a company that wants to reduce their emissions, will come to the state saying, hey, we found someone to do our roadmap for us. Can you help us to finance it? So I was wondering about the mechanics and implementation of this point.
So I mean, I can give you the answer. That's usually a good old public sector. There is a working group at the moment ongoing, which is basically looking at how this should be implemented. There is different ideas around. One is, for instance, that you rely on existing roadmaps like SBTi and the like. However, it's important to say these roadmaps are targeting scope 1 and 2. Scope 3 is according to the commission's not ruling, but the commission's idea. The Parliament's commission is voluntary. There is the idea to rely on existing providers like ENAF, which is the Energieagentur der Wirtschaft, which provides roadmaps. And then there is also the idea to have it not like exclusive, so there should not be a monopoly for that. I think much of this will be, we heard this fall or earliest end of this year, there will be some kind of Vernehmlassung and consultations on the Verordnung for that, so there will be much clearer. But short answer is it's not quite clear yet, but the administration is working on it.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Alexander, for providing the answer. And I think it's time to wrap up. I think this was a very insightful session, and for myself, I have learned a lot, especially about how even though Switzerland is only responsible internationally for a very small amount of carbon emissions, there's a lot that we can do, and there are many opportunities that we can take away from these innovations and the electrical transition. So I would like to once again thank our speakers, Alexander, Annette, and Björn, for taking the time today and explaining to us from their ends how we can prepare for the 2050 climate strategy. And thank you everybody for calling in. It was a very nice sustainability lunch session, and we hope to see you all back here soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you
so much.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Thanks, bye.